Welcome to the Lumenverse. Before we begin, are you listening to this while it's raining, or is it sunny where you are? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoy our stories, please remember to like and subscribe. Now, let's begin. As the dark, rainy night settled upon the town, the people steered clear of a certain stretch of the known as Hollow Creek Road. The street's asphalt was riddled with cracks, and the once functional streetlights now stood as dark monuments to abandonment. The dense fog only added to the ominous atmosphere, leaving the car headlights virtually useless. Yet, if one ventured far enough, they would come across a towering house, its boarded windows like hollow eyes gazing out at the desolate landscape. The sagging front porch resembled a weary sigh. One man, a diligent delivery man, once claimed he saw a spectral woman clad in a flowing white dress, her figure almost ghostly, beckoning to him near the dilapidated house. When he cautiously stepped closer, the decaying wooden porch suddenly collapsed beneath him, revealing a dark crawl space reeking of decay. Within the dimly lit space, his flashlight's meager glow revealed an astonishing sight. Hundreds of small wooden figurines with glass eyes and sewn-shut mouths. Amidst the eerie collection, something stirred. Laura found herself riding the last bus of the night, the vehicle nearly empty save for her and the fatigued driver. The relentless rain pounded fiercely against the windows, hindering her view of the passing streetlights. As the bus crawled down the deserted road, a strange incident unfolded. The vehicle began to slow, not at the stop. Kara leaned forward, peering down the empty aisle. She noticed something eerie. The driver was no longer looking at the road, his gaze fixated on the empty seats behind her. Kara's heart raced as her gaze fixated on the mysterious figure seated 4 rows behind. She was certain the man hadn't been there when she first boarded the bus. He sat with an unnatural stillness, his face hidden in shadow. But she could make out a chilling smile that played upon his lips. The driver's urgent voice pierced the tense atmosphere, imploring her not to look at the enigmatic stranger again. The bus rattled on, the headlights intermittently illuminating the shadowy interior, revealing a disconcerting sight. The man was no longer 4 rows back. He had moved closer. David settled into his new apartment above the old bookstore. The thin walls and creaky floorboards seemed to whisper secrets of the building's history. It was raining then, a steady beat against the windows. Just as David was deep into unpacking, an unexpected occurrence caught his attention. It was the sound of the old rotary phone in the kitchen. Despite not having been plugged in, 3 slow, deliberate chimes filled the quiet space. Hesitantly, David picked up the heavy, dusty receiver. "Hello," he managed, his voice trembling with apprehension. The following evening, the rotary phone rang once more, and the same whispery voice spoke from the other end, uttering the cryptic warning, "You shouldn't be there." David was unnerved, but his curiosity got the best of him. Just before midnight, standing in the hallway, waiting, the clock struck 12, the atmosphere changed, the air grew colder, heavier, and at the far end of the hall, a chilling sight unfolded. A pale woman clad in a torn dress, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, holding the phone receiver in her hand. As a child, Ellen spent many summer afternoons at her grandparents' farmhouse, where a well, covered by a rusty metal lid, stood in the shadows behind the barn. She had been told many times not to open it, but curiosity got the better of her. On one particularly hot summer day, Ellen heard something strange, a slow knocking sound coming from deep within the well. Thinking that an animal might be trapped at the bottom, she carefully maneuvered the lid open and peered into the inky darkness. At that moment the knocking stopped, replaced by an eerie whisper of a single word. Her name. In the dead of night, Ellen was woken by the chilling sound of a voice calling her name, wet and ragged like someone struggling to breathe underwater. The sound seemed to come from beneath her bed, and in her panic, she screamed for her grandparents. They burst into the room, but the incessant knocking continued until her grandfather finally moved the bed away from the wall. Underneath, they discovered a horrifying sight, wet handprints, trailing across the floor towards the bedroom door. Josh was traveling across the country when he checked into a small, roadside motel. The clerk handed him a key to room 6 and gave him an unnerving warning. "If you hear knocking on the walls, don't answer it." Later that night, as the rain pattered against the window, Josh was reading in bed, unable to sleep. At exactly 2:17 a.m., he heard it, 3 knocks, faint but distinct, coming from the wall behind the headboard. Instinctively, Josh knocked back. Mara stayed late at the library one stormy night. closing up after the power outage caused by the fierce weather. As she walked through the darkened parking lot, Mara noticed something unsettling, her shadow stretching out in front of her, even though the source of light was behind. More disturbingly, the shadow's head seemed to turn independently, leading her movements. In her car driving home, she caught glimpses of a dark shape in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Back home, Mara rushed inside, barricading the doors and windows. Then, in the reflection of the television screen, she saw a terrifying. As autumn began to make way for winter, Eric's uncle requested his assistance in closing up their isolated cabin deep within the wilderness. Without electricity or any cell reception, the cabin was completely isolated from the outside world. Later that night, the cabin was filled with the soothing sound of rain on the roof and the comforting crackle of the fire. Eric decided to step outside for some fresh air, but what he witnessed was far from comforting. Small glowing lights floated between the trees, their unnatural, steady pulses creating an eerie sight. As the glowing lights continued to float closer, Eric began to make out faint outlines surrounding each one. To his horror, he realized that the lights were actually vaguely shaped like figures, tall, thin silhouettes that moved without making a sound. One by one, the lights flickered out, leaving just one remaining, now hovering very close to him. Eric could swear that he heard whispers coming from the hovering anomaly, a faint, unintelligible sound that sent chills down his spine. Clara had been living in her apartment for 5 years, and she had grown accustomed to the subtle abnormalities of her bathroom mirror. The slight warping of the glass would cause her reflection to appear somewhat altered, with her eyes taking on a darker hue and her smile appearing unnaturally wide. One morning, as she stood in front of the mirror brushing her teeth, something unusual caught her attention. Her reflection seemed to be moving ever so slightly out of sync with her actions. At first, the delay was barely perceptible, but as Clara put the toothbrush aside, the discrepancy became more evident. Clara stood frozen in horror as she witnessed her reflection in the bathroom mirror staring back at her, its grin growing wider and more unnerving. Suddenly, her reflection lifted a hand and tapped on the glass surface from within the mirror. Terrified, Clara swiftly retreated from the bathroom, her heart pounding uncontrollably. However, during the following night, an eerie sound reached her ears once more. A faint but unmistakable tapping, now coming from the bedroom mirror. As the night unfolded, a summer storm unfolded over a secluded lake where Adam was enjoying a night of fishing. The initial rain was gentle, casting a mesmerizing dance of ripples upon the water's surface, illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. Just as he was about to reel in his line, a chilling sound pierced the tranquility of the scene, a voice calling out his name. At first he assumed someone must have fallen into the lake, urgently seeking help. But curiously, the voice was eerily calm, devoid of any hint of distress. The chilling voice continued, its words echoing in his mind, "Adam, jump in. I'll show you something." The command carried an inexplicable weight, ensnaring not just his attention but his entire being, causing his body to feel suddenly heavier. With a strange sense of compliance, he let go of the fishing rod and leaned over the edge of the boat. Below the surface, he caught a glimpse of a pallid face, eyes wide open and mouth moving as if speaking, but in the next lightning flash, it vanished, leaving only ripples in the water that formed the shape of a hand reaching up towards him. Leah was given a stern warning when she moved into her new home. The attic was off limits, deemed unsafe. The previous owner had gone as far as literally nailing the door shut. Despite her growing curiosity, Leah managed to resist the temptation to explore the forbidden area. One particularly stormy night, however, a faint noise from the attic ceiling caught her attention. Slow, rhythmic footfalls, as if something was moving about up there. Initially, Leah attempted to dismiss it as the wind, but soon she realized that the sound wasn't random or natural. It sounded like breathing. The rhythmic breathing, deep and measured, continued its unnerving symphony throughout the day. The next night, as the storm raged outside, Leah decided to investigate further. With a few determined pryings, she managed to loosen the securing nails and cautiously opened the attic doorway. To her surprise, the attic revealed nothing more than dusty surfaces and old wooden boards. But that night, the breathing returned, this time more proximate and more tangible. In the dead of night, at exactly 3 a.m., she jolted awake, realizing that the breathing now emanated from the corner of her very own room. It was late at night when Jacob returned to his hotel room after a long day. The hallway was dimly lit, the pattern on the carpet softening the sound of his footsteps as he made his way to his room. As he neared his door, he paused slightly, alerted by the sound of footsteps coming from behind him. They were slow, measured, and oddly heavy, like the person walking was hobbled by a bad leg. Jacob turned, anticipating to see someone there, but the hallway was completely empty. On a sweltering summer night, Ava decided to take a longer route home, braving the heavy rain. As she crossed a flooded curb, something caught her attention, a porcelain doll trapped in the storm drain. Its paint was cracked and its glass eyes were clouded with age, but to her alarm, the doll's lips moved. As she turned it over in her hands, she noticed the faintest flicker of movement. In the moment she dropped the doll, a faint whisper slipped out of its mouth, barely audible over the sound of the trickling water. From an early age, Oliver felt a strange unease at his grandparents' dwelling. It wasn't due to its age, but rather a more unsettling factor. The house seemed to breathe. In the hushed hours when the rain pattered softly on the windows, Oliver could swear he heard a deep, slow inhale, followed by a long, drawn-out exhale. The air itself would shift, as if the walls were alive and moving gently. Years passed, and when his grandparents passed away, Oliver found himself standing alone in the familiar hallway, the rain once again falling outside. He closed his eyes and waited. One cold, damp evening, Naomi found herself waiting for the final bus of the night. In the pale light of the nearby street lamp, she noticed a woman clad in a long coat lingering in the shadows across the street. The brim of her hat partially obscured her face. Initially, Naomi didn't give it a second thought, but then the woman slowly raised her head, and to Naomi's surprise, she saw that the woman's face was unnaturally pale, almost ghost-like, resembling wet paper exposed to the rain. As a child, Marcus's bedroom faced the woods, and he enjoyed observing the lightning crackle between the trees during raging storms. On one particular night, as rain pounded against the window pane, he noticed something standing eerily still at the edge of the forest. Its silhouette was tall and motionless, unnaturally so. Attempting to dismiss it as just a tree, Marcus watched as another bolt of lightning illuminated the area. To his growing unease, he saw the figure had moved closer and closer, steadily approaching his window. Lena frequently returned home late after work, and the train was usually deserted at night. But one evening as the train pulled to a halt, something caught her attention. The train had no number nor destination sign, while the windows appeared dark inside. To her surprise, the doors opened, inviting her in. As she entered, the air was laced with a faint smell of smoke and damp earth, and the few passengers on board wore outdated attire. Anxiety pulsated within her, and when she glanced out the window, the surroundings outside were unknown, only dense woods visible in the darkness. Maria was busy tidying up the attic when she stumbled upon an old family photo tucked away in a dusty frame. It showed her, her parents, and her little brother, captured when she was 10 years old. Initially, she smiled fondly at the memory, but then her smile faded as she noticed something amiss in the photo. In the far corner of the picture behind her family stood a tall stranger with dark, deep-set eyes. As the night unfolded, curiosity gripped Maria, and she decided to examine the old photograph once more. With bated breath, her eyes darted across the image, and her heart skipped a beat. Unsettlingly, the strange man in the picture appeared closer to her younger self, as if slowly approaching inch by inch. With a sense of mounting dread, Maria repeatedly checked the photo, only to discover that the man's proximity to her child self grew closer with each passing moment. Finally, he stood directly behind her, his presence unnervingly intimate, and dreaded visiting the basement, especially at nighttime. It was always chilly there, and the light bulbs would annoyingly flicker, even if they were brand new. On one particular rainy evening, a power outage caused the breaker to trip, leaving him no choice but to venture into the basement. Halfway down the stairs, he paused as the basement light inexplicably switched on, though he hadn't touched the switch. An unsettling feeling prickled at the back of his neck. As Ethan stood at the bottom of the stairs, an eerie sound reached his ears, steady, measured breathing. Each flicker of the light revealed a shadow that wasn't his own standing just beneath the bulb, disappearing into the blackness as the light steadied. Despite the absence of any visible presence, the breathing persisted, the sound lingering in the still, chilly air. Particularly stormy nights, Claire's dog would often scratch at her bedroom door, signaling his desire to join her. But this particular night, Claire was convinced she had let him into her room earlier. Nevertheless, the familiar sound of scrabbling at the door resumed, soft yet urgent. When she approached the door, she noticed a shadow moving beneath the gap, resembling a hand. Claire called out her dog's name, hoping to hear his usual whine in response. However, the only reply was the slow, creeping shadow moving across the floor. In a tall apartment building, Jared navigated the identical halls, each one indistinguishable from the next. White walls, buzzing fluorescent lighting. One particular evening after work, he took the elevator up, walked down the familiar hall, and fumbled for his keys to what he believed was his apartment door. He unlocked it, stepped inside, and immediately realized something was amiss. The furniture was wrong, and the air carried a distinct, damp, musty scent. As he stood frozen, disoriented, the figure in the middle of the room slowly twisted its head, as if it had been waiting. Holly stumbled upon a vintage mirror at an estate sale, captivated by its ornate carvings and the peculiar way the glass captured light. That very first night, as the new mirror rested in her bedroom, something unusual caught her eye in the reflection. The room appeared normal, but a figure stood in the corner, casting an unsettling presence. Holly twisted her head to investigate, but there was nothing there. When she looked back into the glass, the figure was closer than before, with its neck unnaturally tilted in a way no human neck should bend. Caleb was in the midst of brushing his teeth when a faint sound caught his attention. A whisper, emerging from the bathroom sink's drain. He leaned closer, straining his ears to decipher the sounds. Initially, it resembled a subtle hiss of air. However, as Caleb focused, the words "help me" became discernible, spoken with growing desperation. Concerned and curious, Caleb knelt down, bringing his ear closer to the drain. He asked who was calling, and the whisper transformed into something chilling. A wet, unceasing chuckle that stretched on far longer than humanly possible. Mia had arrived late at night at a hotel, settling into her quaint but tidy room. As she prepared to sleep, she froze, startled by the faint rustling of sheets from the other side of the bed. The sound occurred again, this time more distinct, the slow, deliberate shift of someone rolling over, as if a presence shared the space with her. Mia flicked the light on, her heart pounding, only to find the sheets undisturbed. Not a wrinkle in sight. However, the pillow beside her had a deep depression, suggesting someone's head had occupied that spot moments ago. Every evening, Theo walked down a familiar path illuminated by the same old street light. He noticed that it would flicker occasionally, but the pattern remained consistent, a swift blink before resuming its steady glow. However, on one particular night, something unusual unfolded. The flickering of the streetlight grew more erratic, 2 quick blinks, then 3 times in succession. But when the light eventually flickered out, the shadow it cast still lingered on the ground. The unsettling part was that this shadow was moving. Holly's cozy bedroom featured a modest size with only one window and a lone door. Having lived there for a substantial period, she had grown familiar with every minute detail and imperfection, each scratch on the wood, every chip in the paint. However, one night, Emily was abruptly roused from her slumber, feeling a sense of unease and disorientation. She switched on the lamp, but the once familiar room felt different. The air was denser, and shadows danced in unexpected places. The most startling detail, though, was her desk, which now stood at an abnormal angle, facing the wrong wall. Emily's bedroom felt strangely altered, as if the layout had shifted. Her dresser had encroached closer to the bed, and the door's position had inexplicably moved to the opposite side of the room. Trying to rationalize the situation, Emily closed her eyes, hoping it was all just a dream. However, the following morning, the room appeared perfectly normal, except for the dim tracing left on the floor from where the furniture had been dragged. Leaving an uneasy reminder of the uncanny nighttime experience, Owen was meticulous about keeping order, and thus maintained the habit of leaving his closet door closed at night. However, a peculiar disturbance had been interrupting his sleep recently. It wasn't the typical sounds of scratching or creaking that commonly plagued the imagination. Instead, it was the unsettling noise of breathing, slow and measured, as if an entity stood just inside the closet, silently inhaling in the darkness. Unable to endure the eerie sounds any longer, Owen mustered the courage to fling open the closet door. To his disbelief, the space was completely empty. Lana had driven across the wooden bridge over the river on numerous occasions, the familiar route taking only a brief 30 seconds to complete. Nevertheless, on this particular foggy evening, she found herself in a disturbingly different predicament. After seemingly driving for over a minute, Lana failed to reach the end of the bridge. The far side refused to materialize, leaving her stranded in the midst of the vast, unending structure, enveloped by the ever-thickening fog. The fog intensified, reducing Lana's visibility to nearly zero. As her vehicle traversed the ancient wooden bridge, the sounds of the planks beneath the tires echoed eerily through the atmosphere, where there was no soothing sound of water cascading below. Instead, an ominous, almost rhythmic hum pervaded the air, as if they were not traversing a natural landmark, but a colossal, otherworldly structure. To her horror, Lana noticed a peculiar detail. Despite her initial assumptions, she had been driving backward this entire time. Nora cherished an antiquated photograph of her grandmother from her youth, captured in a joyful moment as a young teenager on the porch of the family home, engrossed in a book. On an unassuming afternoon, amidst a gentle rain shower, Nora couldn't help but notice a perplexing detail within the image. The photograph appeared subtly altered. Something had shifted, causing an inexplicable feeling of unease to creep over her. Nora's concern grew as she observed the ominous transformation within the cherished photograph. Her grandmother's once smiling visage had vanished, replaced by a fixed gaze, a disturbing stillness that chilled her. As days passed, the unsettling alterations persisted. The figure in the photograph seemed to move closer each passing day, the once quaint porch becoming devoid of life. On the third day, any remnants of tranquility vanished as the porch stood vacant, leaving behind a haunting emptiness. One fateful night, as Eli was about to retire for the evening, he was jolted by the distinct sound of someone rapping on his front door. The rhythm was precise yet calculated. 3 deliberate taps, followed by a brief pause, and then 3 more taps. As Eli approached the entrance and cautiously pulled the door open, his eyes were met with an empty and dark front porch. A sigh of relief escaped his lips as he prepared to close the door. However, much to his horror, the knocking sound reverberated again, this time emanating from the now closed door itself. As Hannah drove through the isolated country lane, a peculiar sight caught her attention. A small house sitting alone amidst a sea of swaying wheat stalks. It was a sight that should have been impossible. There was no driveway or path leading to the house, and she had traveled this route numerous times before. Yet this mysterious dwelling had never graced the landscape. Her curiosity piqued, Hannah slowed her car, her eyes locked on the front door. It creaked open eerily, as if beckoning her in. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest as she witnessed a disconcerting scene unfold before her eyes. A tall, slender figure emerged from the front door, cloaked in shadow, concealing its face from view. The figure extended its arm, and in response every stalk of wheat in the field bent towards it, forming a bowing motion. Terrified, Hannah pressed her foot to the gas pedal, accelerating away from the peculiar sight. As she glanced back in her rear-view mirror, the vast field appeared as it should, vacant and undisturbed. Matt was used to falling asleep with the television on as background noise, finding solace in the familiar hum. However, one particular night, he was abruptly roused from his slumber by an unsettling discovery. The television channel had gone to static. As the eerie white noise filled the room, he detected a soft whisper intermingling with the hissing sounds. The voice, barely audible, was calling his name. In a state of panic, Matt quickly muted the television, fully expecting the whispering to cease. To his dismay, the faint sound persisted, still coming from right beside his bed. Kara, weary after a long shift, decided to walk home down her usual route. The familiar street should have brought a sense of comfort, but something felt off that night. She strode past her neighbor's red mailbox once, twice, thrice, yet the same 5 houses lined the road, a peculiar loop playing on repeat. In an attempt to break free, Kara sprinted in desperation, only to stumble and fall. As she looked up, she found herself in her own driveway, the sky now painted with the first hues of sunrise. In the quaint antique store, Olivia's eyes were drawn to a stunning hand mirror, its silver frame tarnished with age yet holding a certain charm. The warped glass gave her reflection a captivating appeal. On the night she took the mirror home, an unsettling encounter unfolded. As she peered into the mirror, she noticed something amiss. Her reflection was smirking, an expression she herself was not making. Troubled, she returned to the mirror later, and was met with another disconcerting sight. The reflection's gaze had shifted, now focused intently on something behind her. As Aaron observed the flickering lantern bobbing gently between the reeds, curiosity stirred within him. Assuming someone might be lost or in need of assistance, he called out, his voice cutting through the calm of the night. To his surprise, the lantern ceased swinging and appeared to turn in his direction, as if it was aware of his presence. Perplexed, Aaron watched as the flickering light began to glide closer, its motion impossibly smooth without any bobbing or sign of footsteps. It glided across the water, defying natural patterns, inching closer to where he stood. Derek stood transfixed as the lantern glided across the water, its glow illuminating the eerie forms taking on the light. Shadows shifted and twisted, resembling shoulders, heads, and yet no faces emerged. As the lantern crept closer, he began to discern the shadowy presence of numerous figures, standing shoulder to shoulder in rows ankle-deep in the murky black water. Suddenly, a chilling realization dawned upon him. The lantern, instead of guiding people towards safety, was designed to lure unsuspecting victims off the solid boardwalk. The apartment's flooding had led to a series of repairs, including tearing up a section of Lila's bedroom wall. To her surprise, behind the modern drywall lay an older wooden wall, complete with a mysterious tiny door. As she placed her ear against the small door, she was struck by an unsettling sound. A whisper-soft breathing, slow and methodical, as if someone was silently standing just on the opposite side, breathing in the same measured rhythm. In the depths of night, Lila found herself enveloped in a disturbing dream. A vision of the little door slowly creaking open, and a nightmarish figure emerging with deliberate, unhurried movements. Its proportions were unnatural, with limbs that were too long for its body, and its face was concealed beneath a veil of inky black hair that cascaded to the floor. When she awoke, gasping for breath, Lila's heart pounded in her chest. To her terror, the tiny door was slightly ajar, and muddy handprints marred her bedsheets. Andrew was aware that no buses operated through his town after midnight, so when he spotted the 47 bus appearing at the stop at the unusual time of 3:17 a.m., he dismissed it as a routine maintenance run. However, what caught his attention was the odd behavior of the driver. Instead of being stern and focused on his route, the driver smiled and even waved at Andrew, gesturing for him to board the bus. As he boarded the bus, Andrew was overcome by an odd sensation. The bus was eerily dark, the air strangely moist and heavy with a distinct earthy scent. The passengers, all clad in drenched clothing, sat silently, their heads hung low and water dripping from their damp clothes, creating little pools on the floor. Andrew took a seat near the rear of the bus. Strangely, no one looked up or acknowledged his presence. The bus, now in motion, took an unfamiliar route, turning down roads that did not exist during daylight hours. As the bus continued its ominous journey through the fog, Andrew's uneasiness deepened. In the dense woods surrounding the road, he noticed the haunting silhouettes of people standing in groups, their pale faces staring at the bus with an unwavering stillness. Anxiously, he turned to locate the driver, only to discover the seat was empty. The steering seemed to move on its own accord, and when he tried to exit the bus, he found the doors immovable, locked tight. Evelyn arrived at the historic brick hotel, her nostrils greeted by a faint scent of mildew and lemon polish. The hallway floors displayed a subtle dip in the middle, marked by the repeated paths of numerous guests. After exiting the elevator, she made her way to room 616, only to find a perplexing twist. The numberings on the brass door plates seemed to abruptly skip from 612 to 614, with a mysterious blank stretch of wallpaper occupying the space where room 616 should have been. Confused and somewhat perturbed, Evelyn ran her hand along the wallpaper and felt an unexpected object, a hidden doorknob embedded discreetly within. As she pulled, the wallpaper ripped away, revealing a door that opened into the darkened room behind. Stepping inside, Evelyn was taken aback by the sight of an oddly small space, as if the room had become increasingly more constrained over the years. A solitary light bulb swung above, providing a feeble glow over a bed shrouded in plastic sheeting. The wallpaper here bore the same pattern as that in the hallway, yet the once vibrant colors had transformed into limp, lifeless foliage. As Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest, the phone resting on the faded nightstand began to shrill, its sound growing more and more persistent with each passing moment. With trembling hands, she picked up the receiver. A chilling voice whispered through the line, sending a shiver down her spine. "You're not supposed to be here," the voice murmured. Frantically, she rushed to the door, only to find the wallpaper had seamlessly closed over the exit, like a living, breathing barrier. Miles found solace in night drives during the rain, captivated by the soothing symphony of raindrops against the windshield. and the hypnotizing rhythm of the wipers. The headlights sliced through the inky darkness, carving a path ahead. As he drove past a secluded field, something caught his gaze, a tall figure standing motionless amidst the crops. At first Miles thought it was a scarecrow, but as the head of the figure tilted in his direction, his heart skipped a beat, realizing this specter was no mere replica. As Miles continued driving, he couldn't help but notice the same odd figure appearing in every field he passed, always donning the same hat and standing with a striking consistency. Each sighting brought the ominous stranger progressively closer to the road, as if closing the distance between them with each mile. Feeling increasingly unsettled, Miles decided to make a pit stop at a gas station to gather his thoughts. Approaching the clerk, he inquired about the surrounding farms, seeking any possible explanation for the bizarre occurrences along the highway. The clerk's face paled as he shared the harrowing tale of the vanishing farmer, whose boots had been discovered deeply lodged in the muddy field, as if he had simply evaporated from existence. On his way back, Miles couldn't help but steal nervous glances into the fields that lined each side of the road. They seemed eerily devoid of life until he drew closer to town, where he spotted the haunting silhouette at the edge of the road. The man in the hat now stood so close that Miles could see drops of rain trickling from the brim and the unsettling, abnormally wide smile gracing the figure's face. Miles pressed his foot onto the gas, desperate to escape the malevolent presence. But no matter how fast he drove, the man in the hat effortlessly kept pace, gliding effortlessly along the road as if he were a shadow on the pavement, unhindered by physical limitations. As the car sped towards town, the headlights illuminated the surroundings, revealing a horrifying sight. The man in the hat was now closer than ever, just a few feet away, still moving at an unnatural speed, maintaining its uncanny smile.